Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host, Matthew Head, and in this episode, I'm talking to Stephen Martin. He's one of the founders of The Truth About Dyslexia, which he founded in 2018 to help adults with life, work, and their relationship. He's also a host of the Truth About Dyslexia podcast, where he shares weekly 15-minute episodes sharing tips and his experiences. It's amazing he had over 700,000 downloads. Outside of his work with dyslexia, he's the creative director of Virtual Innovation, where he and his team provide web design, automation, and lead generation. As always, I'll put links to The Truth About Dyslexia, the podcast, and Virtual Innovation in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you for having me, Matthew. It's wonderful to be here.
No problem at all. As you may have picked up from Steve's accent, he is actually from New Zealand, so we're dealing with a big time zone lag here. But one of the things I wanted to have a start off with is really that you got diagnosed at 9-year-old. I assume you're born and bred in New Zealand. And I'm really curious what being picked up with dyslexia as a young child in New Zealand is like compared to sort of my experience as I got statemented at 6 in the UK.
Mate, there's a great story behind this because, being born in New Zealand, I lived here until I was, I want to say 7 or 8. And my father got a contract in Saudi Arabia, of all places.
Oh, wow. That's a bit different.
That's a bit different. It's always nice to have a curveball in a story, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And so we moved over there when I was 8 years, I want to say 7 years old, over to Saudi Arabia, joined a private school for 4 years in total. I lived over there. And I was lucky enough that I was in a private school that they actually picked up my dyslexia because in New Zealand, they didn't recognize it at government level or across the schooling system until 2007.
Wow.
So I would have
that
been,
late?
Yeah, that late. Yeah, it was, there's a story there as well. But when it comes to my diagnosis, I was really struggling in class, and one of the teachers recognized that I was really at pains to copy words off the board. It just wasn't happening. It's causing me headaches. There was issues with what I was copying. And that was how they worked out something was wrong. And every year they sent out a dyslexia specialist to the school, and they basically chose the kids they thought had dyslexia, and they diagnosed me. It must have been, trying to think back at how old I am, would have been in 94 or 95, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Yeah, back in the day.
That is a curveball because I didn't think you were going to talk about Saudi Arabia. So was that like a New Zealand or British-based school in Saudi Arabia? British, right, yes. So they obviously were a bit more turned on to it, which I imagine is kind of backed off the work that the PDA and people do over here that helps with that kind of in our education system. Now, they're coming once a year. They statement you with dyslexia, then what happened? How did the sort of Saudi Arabian / British education system help you out after that?
Oh, great question. So my mum was, a good dyslexic mum, should we say? Like we've all got family members that we relied on. And so when she found out, she went fully into it. And so she actually ended up doing so she was like, I'm going to sort my son out, save my son, help my son.
Oh, wow.
So she was the constant mother who said, you can do anything. Dyslexia won't hold you back. Don't even think about it. Just carry on. She was that person.
Oh,
but
cool.
she definitely managed to give me the benefit of printed notes rather than having a copy off the board. That was a huge help at that age. It was a massive, massive step. He also, as I say, went and did a qualification out of the UK to learn how to be a teacher's aide for those with dyslexia. Like she wasn't one to sit and wait and hold back. And in later years, as I've learned more, she definitely fits the dyslexic profile. So, she went 100% full speed in to try and work out how to help. She actually got the qualification. And then kind of fast forward a couple of years, at the age of 12, we moved back to New Zealand. And schooling over here, like, to be blatantly honest, New Zealand took a bit longer to catch up with dyslexia fully. It was known about, but it wasn't something mandated at government level at that point. So when we got back in, we just couldn't. She wasn't even able to help because they didn't recognize it which was really interesting. So she basically, they just didn't have the dyslexic help. She fought really hard at exam time to have a teacher act as a reader-writer. So I would, if you've heard of those, speak out the answers. And they would write. And I aced all those exams once I had one of those. So I was very lucky to have a mother that fought really hard for me, and appreciated it massively.
Yeah, it's really interesting. As you say, coming back to New Zealand, where and you touched on actually started to become into government in about 2007, which is well after you left school if you got picked up in 94. So, but apart from having scribes and exams, as you mentioned, which I did at uni and found it really, really helpful, was there anything your mother was doing with you at home to kind of keep you, should we say, up to speed with the rest of the class? Because I imagine English lessons and stuff would have been quite tricky for you if they weren't putting any sort of adjustments in.
Yeah, I definitely at high school, I do remember being in what I guess was called in the old days the special English class, where to be blatantly honest, they instead of giving you books to read, they let you watch videos. So it's basically just a visual learning course rather than over reading. So it was like in New Zealand, that was pretty much what it was. Is that you watched a movie, you watched Moby Dick rather than read it. Kind of thing, just as an example. So there was a lot more visual learning. It kind of reminded me just how little they knew 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago about this stuff. It was so much more limited. At least over in the colonies. Over here, it was at least.
Yeah. Did you go into higher education at all after that, or did you, once you'd done school, that was it, you parked everything and dived into work?
Oh, great question. Like I came out of school, I remember Form 7, I'm not sure if they call it the same thing over there, but 7th form back when I was there, someone said to me 3 months in, did you know you can walk up to the counter and just sign yourself out of this place? And I was like, that's a good idea. So I did that day. I was just like, this is not working for me. I want to be doing stuff. Like many of us, kinesthetic visual learners. So I wrote it. So basically, I signed myself out. I considered going to do more of a technical course, but instead I got myself into work and started working at an AA driver licensing place. So kind of think the equivalent. We basically issued driver licenses for Kiwis, for New Zealanders. Was where I got my first start.
Okay. I like the long level critical decision. You can sign yourself up school. I'm there, within about 3 minutes.
I was like, I know where the office is. I can sign my name.
How did that go down with everybody else? Like, you get home from school, what happened today? Well, I finished that.
I think by that point, my parents may have realized that was probably my path. It was a little bit more hands-on, should we say. I definitely wasn't engaged in that last year. Like, it just was never my thing. Like, I always think back, the best thing I learned at school was how to touch type. I found that such a hack in my life, is that I could touch type so quickly. My brain, I could kind of keep up with how fast my brain worked by touch typing. And that was, I learned that in 6th form, and I didn't really value it enough until later in life, but it's meant that I can keep up with everything rather than my handwriting. I just take a lot longer, as you can imagine.
Yes, yeah. Actually, it's something I've never learned to do, but seen a lot with the touch typing thing, because I'm still very much the one finger kind of look at the keyboard to kind of type. Yeah, that's the one.
As long as it works, right? As long as it goes quickly, you're good.
But it doesn't. That's the problem. Luckily, I have a job that doesn't involve a lot of typing.
That's good.
But if dyslexia wasn't really heavily recognised in the school system in New Zealand, and I guess experience with other countries, that if it's recognised in school, sort of wider society is normally behind that. So when you got into work, that must have been even less understanding than you had when you were in school. How did you call?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Like I was lucky I could write to a certain degree. I wouldn't be writing novels, but when it came to government level, stuff. It was very systematic. I was quite lucky to have a good team. I think I was naturally quite friendly and outgoing at that point. And I had a mother that for the majority of my childhood said, dyslexia doesn't matter, just keep going. And so that's kind of what like my whole life, I just never let it hold me back, and at that early age especially, that was my mother's way of thinking. She never considered she had it. She had no understanding around the hereditary side of it, or let's just say if she did know, she didn't want to recognize it, should we say. And I'd just been told, you're out of school, it doesn't matter now, keep going harder and harder. And it was more just hard work and energy that got me through that at that point of my life rather than anything else. It was just, I can't be beaten. I'm kind of blind. Let's call it blind faith at that age was the technique.
Fair enough. And you said you were dealing out licenses initially, but what did your career look like in its early stages? As you left school, I need a job, I want to get hands-on, but I guess you didn't really know what you wanted to do with yourself. You just wanted to be out of school at that point in your life, right?
Exactly. But so you're kind of going through my job history was, not that dyslexics all have a 1-year job process for short-term jobs. You haven't heard that before, have you? So I remember starting, I had a 2-week job cleaning and I didn't have the attention span for that before I got the AA job working with driver licenses. That didn't work. I had a 2-week job installing car stereos. And I always remember this guy sitting me down after 2 weeks after I'd burned my hand with a soldering iron. Him going, this isn't really the job for you. And so you lost all these other jobs. And then with the AA, I was like, oh, okay. I lasted there a couple of years. I enjoyed it, made some friends. And then I went into a contact center at a bank, which was really interesting.
Okay.
So that was an intriguing one. I enjoyed talking on the phone more than writing a lot. The benefit of that was it was a lot more reading. I don't have dyscalculia, so I'm actually quite good with numbers. And it kind of worked for a while. And, I ended up going through a few admin careers, for a while, but nothing really kept my attention. I always was thinking outside the box. I could always see the bigger picture. I could always see what could be fixed.
Yes.
And when you're one of the guys on the ground, you don't really get that opportunity, right? You're kind of the foot soldier. And so before I knew it, I was very lucky that I decided to go to, these big 2-3 day events where they have like a hypnotist or a neuro-linguistic programming expert, someone who does that. So I went along to a 2-day seminar, and it was the first time I'd ever been to one of these big rah-rah things. And it was amazing. Like, it gave me so much energy. And I met a guy there who we became really good friends, and he ended up helping me get into the world of internet marketing. So he sent me along to an event, and I'm not sure if you've seen this with a lot of your dyslexic guests, but many of us are very good at absorbing information quickly. Just very. So I went along to this event, had never done it before, absorbed it really quickly. Before the end of the 2 days, I was teaching other people how to do it, even though I'd never done it in my life. Not that that's, just mirroring it back to them in a way they could understand and explaining it with metaphors. And from that point, one of the guys in the audience decided he wanted to do this course that was on offer. It was in New Zealand. So in British pounds, it would be about £10,000, this course. As a kid, I had no money, as you can imagine. But he goes, there's something about you. I believe in you. I'm going to put the money down if you do the course. And we'd met each other over 2 days. So it was quite amazing, quite amazing. And, we went away, did this course, made a little bit of money, but more than anything, learned a huge amount. And from there, my career has really stuck around event management. So I started running those big events. You always learn what you're watching. And then also into the digital marketing realm where I could see websites and get really creative. So I built a team over that. And what's really interesting about the whole story is that guy who paid for that course is still my business partner today, 16 years later. Wow. And we've got a great relationship. So yeah, and it's kind of how my career progressed.
That's really cool. Like, talk about somebody who said something on podcast earlier, whether we should invest in people and their education, and then we get a percentage back of their life. And that's kind of that point, isn't it? With that guy still being your business partner, he's like, I back you, and then he's kind of got his money back, I'm sure, and then some being your business partner.
Exactly. And he was an accountant by trade. So, you know, any dyslexic entrepreneur needs someone who keeps them out of jail. You know, not from doing anything on purpose wrong, but, you know, as you can imagine, all the details of the numbers don't really interest me too much. Do you know what I mean? So, like,
I do.
It kind of was a valuable partnership for both of us.
But it's an interesting thing with you saying about dyslexic thinking and your ability to watch his presentations go on and absorb the information. And then you're saying, explaining in metaphors. So using all your visual kind of skills to put it all together. Is that something you knew you had from a young age, or is that something you kind of now retrospectively looking back and knowing what you know about dyslexia now, you're like, that was that?
You did right. Like back in the early days, I didn't really understand it, but I'd always been told I had a real skill for taking the complex and explaining it in a simple way with stories and metaphors. Purely, you know, in hindsight, again, it was always the visual mind, the dyslexic mind at work, being able to create meaning and then explain that meaning really quickly. I always remember I'm throwing a date out around 12 years ago. I was doing a training for someone on a piece of software. I got around to their house and realized it wasn't the piece of software I thought it was. It was something completely different. And I'd never touched it in my life. But I managed to do a 2-hour training on a piece of software I'd never used before for this person. And she had no idea that I'd never touched it. And it was just purely intuition and explanation. It was in hindsight, it was such a great example of how our minds work and how, you know, sometimes when we're put up against it, when we have no other choice, is where we sometimes really succeed and get to that point where you can't go back.
Yes. And it's interesting. Yeah, I guess from that point onwards, once that guy had invested in you, you started being self-employed, which rather than, as you alluded to earlier, being one of the foot soldiers not being able to use your creativity, you rushed to get out of school as quick as you could. And then once you happened by sheer happenstance to go to this event and find the thing and bump into the right person at the event, it sort of took off.
100%. And that was really the, it was, we can all say luck, but you've got to kind of put yourself in those positions. And I think there was always something in my gut that said, I wasn't the person to just press the button on the computer, just to click repeat. And so, you know, although I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family, both my parents, they dabbled a little bit, but, I had to learn the hard way of getting a lot of stuff wrong as an entrepreneur. But once you get there, you don't go back, right? It's hard to.
Yeah, I imagine so. And so would that be where virtual innovation comes from? Because that's sort of your marketing arm of, you got your two kind of businesses, and we'll get on to the juicy dyslexia one in a minute.
Yeah. So virtual innovation, I basically always was in the web design space. So putting up websites, I love the design elements, user experience, how do people go through a journey online. It interested me to imagine customers sitting on one end of Google going through. And so that was always the bit I loved. And so I've probably had 4 businesses in it. The first one was a complete and utter failure. You learn how little you know about business.
Yeah.
I then tried another one with 3 business partners, and that got to a good size. We got some big clients. I learned a huge amount, but again, going through that process, I learned how to pick different partners, which was a real learning experience because human communication is challenging enough. I then built a little company and sold it, and then about 8 or 9 years ago now, I decided to create virtual innovation with that original business partner. And the kind of concept is we weren't going to name it after a website company, because I knew my dyslexic mind by that point and knew I was going to have a bunch of interesting ideas that I'd want to use this company as a vehicle for. And so that's where it started. It's kind of the main work it does is websites, but we've also got a couple of software as a service businesses in it. We hire Filipino virtual assistants for entrepreneurs, a lot of right brand entrepreneurs, and a bunch of other interesting, weird stuff that my brain has come up with over the years. We just kind of, I have my team work with me to implement, which is, it keeps me interested, right? Keeps me focused, should I say, to a point.
I think that's an interesting learning process, isn't it? To have your box of tricks not so narrow that you can start building stuff on top of it if needs be.
Yeah, it's a good learning experience. Like in the old days, I was really tight, but now I'm like, okay, I know how my brain's going to work. I'm going to get something to a point. I'm going to have to hand it off to someone who's more of a repeater. I kind of call the people that just are happy to do the same thing for years, give it to one of them, and then I move on to my next random idea. And hopefully I pick a good one. It's always the hope of this.
Yes. And I thought it was interesting what you were saying about imagining the user experience of a website from the person's click from Google into it. And when I built my website, it was doing the same thing. Like, how does this flow? What does this feel like? It's that sort of journey through it. It should all flow nicely. And there's always bits that bug me even to this day where I'm like, how do I get that little bit easier?
Perfectionism, that's a whole nother podcast on that for us. And I think, and like one of the things the way I explain it, or the way I've learned to explain it is, when you're developing anything, be it a website, developing any bit of material for your business or for yourself, is you've got to remember, majority of the time, we're looking at it from a knowledge level of, say, 8 or 9. We understand what we're doing. We understand the content, the information, all this detail. But the average visitor is probably a 2 on the scale of knowledge. They don't know as much as us. And so there's this giant gap or bridge between the two. And it's trying to understand, how do I get my 8 level knowledge down to a 2 level so that people can actually absorb it? Because if you just speak at this level on your website or your flow or your user experience, people are just going to get lost. They're going to go, this is just too hard, or I'm not with you. And so when you can bridge that gap in anything, any communication, you just win. That's how I've done it.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And it takes a lot of understanding, doesn't it? Because the deeper you get into something, like you've been doing website design for a very long time, the more you naturally understand. So it's harder to see where your level is compared to someone who's never seen it before.
I'd say that's the biggest dyslexic problem I see for business owners is they don't realize how good they are. They just don't realize it, because they can't see how good they are. They think everyone else can do exactly the same thing, which is just not real. Yes.
And it's something I struggled with for a long time, because you see all the good bits that you do, or I saw the good bits that I did as everybody else could do this, and I'm just weaker at these things, rather than actually maybe I'm stronger at these things. And other people can't see it the same way. And it took a long time to get used to that.
It's a huge moment. And I think anyone listening, take that away, is that, you can only see things from your perspective. And I did this with my 7-year-old stepdaughter the other day, trying to teach her perspective, because kids, it's really hard to understand perspective. And so I was sitting next to her. Her mother was brushing her hair. And I said to her, Mila, you've only got one ear. I can only see one ear. That's all you have. That is the truth. And then her mother sitting behind her goes, Mila, you've got no ears, because she couldn't see them with her hair there.
Yes.
She said, you've got 0 ears. And then her auntie across the room goes, Mila, you've got 2 ears. I'm right. And so just trying to explain truth versus perception to a kid, because, and this is the same with dyslexics. We kind of have always thought we've got no ears, but actually there are people looking at you from different angles who can see the value or the different perspective of the same truth, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does, most definitely. And it's very useful to be surrounded by people who are able to reflect some of the things back to you that you don't realize you do naturally.
Agreed. So agreed.
Yes. So that brings me on to the truth about dyslexia. So you set it up with 3 people in 2018. What was I assume the seed behind that was your experience with dyslexia, but what made you think I need to set up a business to do with this?
Yeah, good question. So how did it first start? So I first got diagnosed with dyslexia at about 9, around that area. And then as I got older, I was always searching for something. My dad could see it. So he had his eyes on me and said, I was always going to these events or watching self-help videos. I never think I got depressed, but I had anxiety, anxiety of too much work, anxiety of too little work. There was no balance in the middle. It was always running between the two and always looking for this magic pill. I see this as a real thing with dyslexia. We're always looking for tactics or ways out that'll just solve it like that.
Yeah.
And my mum, for the whole of my life, had said, dyslexia will never hold you back. Don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. Just carry on with your life. And it wasn't until my dad, we were sitting at a pub having a beer, and he kept saying to me, he goes, have you ever thought about digging deeper into dyslexia? And I was like, no, Dad, that doesn't hold me back. And so he said that 4 or 5 more times. We've got thick skulls a lot of the time. And so it finally embedded. And he found a Davis dyslexia practitioner. I'm not sure if you've heard of the practice.
I've taken the course.
Have you done Life Concepts? Have you done the Life Concepts one?
I have not. No.
That was the one. I went along. So, long story short, I contacted the lady Vanessa up the road, who was literally, I could have walked there. I didn't, but I could have. And she called me 5 times to remind me to book a session in. And just kept calling me because I was useless. Go, oh yeah, I'll do that another day. A bit of object permanence, and I just forget about it. And so she finally got me in the door, and I was sitting down at her office, which was at her home, and we did a 2-hour session where she went deeper on dyslexia. I, like many in my early 30s, had worked out the hacks to deal with reading, writing, and spelling. I had Grammarly, I had all the tools. I could get through. I could pass life. I could survive. But she started to talk about what else does dyslexia do beyond reading, writing, and spelling. And that was the bit that really got me thinking. And I always remember sitting at the table, and she had some builders around working on her deck. They were upgrading it. And she looked at me while she was talking, and she could see my eyes just flick up to the roof. And she goes, where did you go? And I look at her and I go, what do you mean, where did I go? I'm sitting here. And she goes, where did you go? Like in your head, where did you go? And I said, I could hear your builder banging on the deck. And she goes, in your mind, can you picture that? And I go, yep, I did picture that. And she said to me across the table, so you've never been on my deck. You've never met my builder. You don't know what it looks like. Yet you've created an image in your head. Like that deck could be covered with rubber ducks, yellow rubber ducks for all you know. But you've created from that one sound a memory that's not real. And she said, imagine if half your life was like that. Oh. And I just got goosebumps across my skin. And that was the moment I kind of went, wow, there's more to this thing than I've ever known. And I went on and did the Life Concepts course with her, which is going beyond the reading and writing and spelling. And it works with the concept of dyslexics really struggle to build identity and to find concepts like cause and effect, what non-physical words are. So, for example, we all know what a desk is, or a table, a window. That's physical. We can all agree on it. But when we talk about words like authority, we struggle to define that without a visual. So if you'd have asked me in the old days what authority was, to me, that was a police officer driving down the road. That was my picture, my feeling.
Yes.
But that's not the right definition, right? That's just a feeling and a visual. And you imagine the same with love, relationships, cause and effect. We really struggle with timelines, all of these things that are beyond reading, writing, and spelling. And this course went deep on each of them to help me understand the concepts, to build a ground layer in myself where I could build a path forward. And that course changed my life. And when I realized how little I knew about dyslexia, I found it kind of my journey to start podcasting about it. I just wanted to share my diary really and just kind of be completely open. I just felt like I wanted to share this. I thought, how did I not know about this? How have I been running in the dark for 10 years thinking it was just reading and writing? and to learn the spatial side, to learn all this other stuff, completely shifted every part of my life. And so that's kind of how it got started, at least.
Yes. And I remember I'd listened to the Gift of Dyslexia first and then got partway through. It was like, this is describing me. I need to phone. So I was emailing somebody at that point when it's still playing on Audible. And did all the modelling up and stuff. It sounds like we did a slightly different course, but yeah, it's amazing. And some of the, getting the concept of time down, did all the modelling, what time is and all that kind of stuff. And
it's amazing, right? When I first did it, I thought this is way too simple. This is a bit stupid. There's the first thing that goes through your head when you think you can solve everything yourself to a point. And then you get through it and you're like, the penny drops and you're just like, wow.
Yeah. And even crazy stuff like the balance stuff. I was like, what? No, I'm a tall guy with long limbs. I thought that was just that.
There's so much, right?
What do you mean?
Exactly. And this is kind of where I got to with, so myself and Vanessa were the two that originally founded Truth About Dyslexia. So Vanessa was the Davis dyslexia practitioner. I really basically just decided one day I'll start a podcast and a Facebook group to help people. And that's kind of where it all kind of kicked off from. And I'm sure for a few months, no one listened. And now it was just me talking into the vacuum, but it definitely helped me out. And then I started getting messages from around the world. And I always remember one I got, which was a lady in America who heard the podcast, and she messaged me and said, I finally feel heard and that someone knows me, because I always thought it was beyond reading and writing. And she literally said she was about to commit suicide and she decided not to because she heard this podcast. And I was like, wow, okay, I'll keep doing the podcast.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful, right? So, that one trigger just kept me going for the last 3 or 4 years, or however long it's been going, 5 years. And I just kept going.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And I mean, stories like that, how do you not keep going after that kind of thing? Like it's powerful stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what happens with the Truth About Dyslexia outside of the podcast? I see there's sort of coaching and other things involved on the website. So explain more what else you do before we get into the podcast.
Great question. So I kind of originally we started it back in 2018-ish, when I started the podcast itself. And we kind of tried a bunch of different things. So we created a couple of little courses. I created one called To-Do List Bingo, which is a strategy I use to do to-do lists. That's been very effective. Yeah, so that was a fun one. And we did a couple of videos on YouTube that have had some pretty good feedback over the years. The 7 hidden traits of dyslexia. And we just started trialing a lot of stuff because I had resource at my agency at the time. And we tried a bunch of stuff. And as a business, I ended up doing about 40 different coaching sessions around the world in 2020 when COVID hit. I just gave away coaching for free and just helped a bunch of people in between my spare time around my business. We created as dyslexics do, we created courses, implemented them a couple of times and then got bored. And carried not that happens, right?
No, never.
And so actually we're in a process at the moment of where Truth About Dyslexia is going to come back fully into my ownership and my control. And then Remarkable Minds, which is the other side of it, which is more the Davis dyslexia practitioner side, and the help working with companies and workplaces is going to separate with Vanessa and Becky, who are amazing. They just want to go down a different path. And I really want to triple down on the work we've done with the Truth About Dyslexia website and its quiz, the podcast, and our support group on Facebook, which is nearly at 3,500 people. So I just want to kind of grow and help where they're a bit more focused on the other side, which is great as well.
Okay, that's so you're splitting the business up. Is it just that you really, really want to focus on, as you say, about the podcast stuff? Does the corporate stuff just not really interest you, or is it just this stuff grabs you so hard that you have to let that go?
It's a great question. And I think with anyone in business or any entrepreneur out there, it's especially with dyslexia, we're always watching those shiny objects running around. And they're so beautiful and shiny. And over the years, I've been as guilty as anybody. Something shiny happens, run. Whereas, I guess maybe it's with age, I want to say, experience. I've kind of said to myself, I can't do it all. And, I had to ask myself, what's the bit I value? What's the bit that brings me light? And it's, the podcast and the feedback from it and the support group. And so I've just decided to double down on it. And next year I'm going to touch wood, be producing. I've got an app in the works. I'll have a few different really short courses for dyslexic minds, just about solutions I've found to help people kind of break through the barrier of just realizing that dyslexia is so much more than reading, writing, and spelling, because that if someone gets that breakthrough and realizes that awareness and finds some tools to help them, like honestly, that was the penny drop for me. So if I can try and help more people, that was, just where my passion laid a bit more.
Okay. And your podcast, you tend to do sort of 15 minutes, or I think 7 to 15 minutes as you advertise, sort of bite-sized pieces a week. What made you think of doing the short form? Because it's the polar opposite of what we're doing here. So I'm curious what sort of drew you to that thing.
Yeah, good question. Like, literally when I first started, I just wanted to build consistency, because I think, the other challenge of dyslexics and those with ADHD as well is it's very hard to create long-term consistency. And so, or I find it hard at least.
Yeah.
And so my idea was, how can I turn this into a little diary of myself where, I can podcast, and I've gone from once a week, twice to 3 times and back and forth over the years. But I just wanted something where I could share a thought. So if I had a really clear thought that week, I'd write it down, or a question, and then I'd be able to just speak to it in kind of just what's going through my mind, just complete brain flow. And that kind of always ended up being that 7 to 15 minute range. And people kept coming back and saying, we love the short form. It's easy for us to listen to 4 at a time and just go through them. And if it doesn't work for us, we move to the next one. So that was kind of the decision. And then occasionally I do bigger interviews from time to time, just if it's someone I want to talk to or I get approached. But yeah, it's just been real. I just really enjoy the process. Like I've tried not to make it this rigid thing I have to do in a certain way.
Yeah.
Or I know I'll get bored of it.
Yes, definitely. And how do you find doing the interviews versus the sort of 15-minute talking to your own microphone kind of thing? Because that's a different skill set.
It is a different, I'm pretty chill in the ones I do, similar to yourself. Like I'll just, usually it's just finding out about the person's story and then trying to find some nuggets of gold for the listeners. And so it's usually, I always say at the beginning of the podcast, if, we're probably going to talk over each other at some point. We'll go on different tangents that make no sense. And we just got to enjoy our time, because life's too short, right? Life's too short to create something that you don't want to do. So I want it to be fun for me and for whoever I'm talking to as well.
No, that's cool. Now, interestingly, so you've got Truth About Dyslexia as in its website entity, its podcast, and virtual innovation. And you've mentioned quite a few times during the interview how trinkets come up and draw your attention. How do you juggle the 3?
Different ways. Like, it's never boring. I kind of, one way I've worked out is that my life will never be boring, is the lesson I've learned. And the more it gets boring, and I've done podcasts on this as well around self-sabotage, because you hit a point where everything's too easy, and we have got to be the most likely to sabotage it because it's boring. Like the minute you hit boredom mode, you're in trouble. And so, I always remember from an ADHD point of view, I spoke to a guy called Dr. Hallowell out of the US. Amazing guy. He's dyslexic. He's got ADHD. Probably, I think, one of the top ADHD researchers in the world. And the one thing he said that to find your happy space, because he writes a lot of books, is he said, you want to find something that's 10% outside your comfort zone. that is our happy place. When we're young, we try and go way out of that. It causes pain. But if we can always sit about 10% outside of it, if that's our goal. And for him, writing books is 10% outside his comfort zone. So he does a lot of that. And for me, I need more than I can handle on at any one time to keep me motivated. If I've just got money coming in and life is just easy, I can find myself turning to other stimulants to kind of try and keep my life interesting, like be it going for an extra drink that I need to, or whatever that looks like. So I find work is a good way to keep me interested. And, probably the thing I've learned the most is I've built more momentum in my businesses than I've ever done. So truth about dyslexia has a lot of machinery behind it, automation and, tools. Like when someone does a quiz, it's all managed. I've taken a lot of the boring parts of the workout just due to having done it for so long. And it's the same with my virtual innovation business and other businesses. So I've made sure that my foundation is solid. And so when I do add something on top, it's not quite as crazy as it used to be, should I say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I haven't heard it put like that before, because I've sat there doing various tasks. And it's like, I kind of, as you say, you get bored of it. And I'm looking at it like, I could do this. I just need, say it's a job at work. I just need 2 8-hour days of focused attention, which is fine. We'll do this, blah, blah, blah. I'll have lunch in the middle of the day. It'll be fine. Can't do it. Staring at everything. Like, what is wrong with me? I can easily do it. But I wonder if that's it. It's just so far within my comfort zone that I actually can't drive my brain to make me do it.
Yeah. I find a lot of dyslexics I've worked with have, we can do an 8-hour job in 2 hours, is what I sometimes look at. We can do 8 hours of hard work in 2 hours. And then when it comes to that boring, repeating stuff there's just no interest. It's purely just a processing task. They're the things we struggle with the most. It's like making sure we do our washing, is the harder piece of the day than it is coming up with the next big idea over on this side. And then, so that's why that's why I found routine has been huge over there. And one of my sidelines, so one of the things I learned early on in business is I hired an assistant from the Philippines, who's basically, that writes a lot of my emails. I work with them through WhatsApp and they help manage me. I'm like Ren's my assistant, who's amazing. She's got 3 kids and I'm her 4th. And she just books things. She's got so much control over me and just looks after my diary. And, it's amazing. You get that and it's working.
Yeah. And it is interesting, like automation and routine are very important. And I find them very important. Like I must do this and then this and then this. It's not the super stiff, rigid thing that it has to be done, otherwise the whole world ends. But if I didn't put stuff down the routine, it just wouldn't get done.
just wouldn't get done, right? Like it's like you can just miss things, eh? It's like, and the thing people have to remember as well is once you become aware of the dyslexic mind and what it's doing, you don't get angry at it anymore. You just laugh.
Yeah.
Like I just laugh. Like there are times where I've completely had such a clear visualization. I've sent a message to someone in my mind. It is so clear it's been done. And then 4 days later, I find out I completely didn't send it in real life. I sent it in my brain. And the old me would have been stupid, man. What an idiot. But new me's like, you got me again. Yeah. And then carry on with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
The best one, however, was I got to the gym once and I was trying to get everything, my water bottle, my towel, like the gym felt so much work for my brain. I got there, had everything there, and I completely forgot to put my shoes on, and I still had my flip-flops or my jandals on. And I was like, I just laughed, and I took a photo and posted it and said, "Here's the dyslexic brain at work."
Yes. Yeah, I have to pack everything the night before because I can't trust the morning me to get it right.
Yeah, exactly. Day before me and same day me. There are definitely 2 versions of my life, I think.
Yeah, there are definitely. Yeah, forward planning helps a lot.
Yes.
Right. All guests that come on the podcast get 3 rapid fire questions from me. They don't necessarily need rapid fire answers from you though. So let's dive into the first one. What prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest one is I thought it was all reading, writing, and spelling. That's what I was taught at 9, 10 years old. It was all about that. didn't have any understanding of how it's connected to the visual kinesthetic side of my mind, no knowledge of any of that. And then, as I say, when that penny dropped, it's kind of like the Matrix, which pill are you going to take? And you realize how you're built. You just realize, like, I was built differently. And I could accept it and I could move forward. It's until I realized that I just, there was always something missing. There's always a piece of, something not quite there. And then now I know it. I can never go backwards.
Yeah, definitely. I think embracing dyslexia and understanding what it is certainly unlocks a lot of doors once you've got to grips with it all.
It's such a boring answer, right? But it's like, it took us so long. Like, the first thing for everything is awareness. And it's such a boring first step. But my God, is it the powerful one. Like, the minute I'm aware you can accept something. The minute you accept something, the way your mind approaches things is different and everything changes. It's the seed. But it's not, people always want the end result or the tactic that's going to do it. Whereas the first bit is that awareness, I've found, at least.
It is, because the tactics come, don't they? Directly you've got a bit of awareness, you're less, you even see things, you're less nervous about putting help with dyslexia, whatever with dyslexia in Google. And suddenly all this other stuff pops up and you go down a rabbit hole of a YouTube channel, a podcast, a website, or whatever sort of suits you, and then start opening more doors, and it sort of cascades from there.
And the trick really is, like, our brains work right to left, in my opinion. So we don't work from starting point to finish. Like, our brains aren't linear. Like, we always go the pretty way to get somewhere. It's never a straight line, right?
Yes.
Like, people go, oh, that's just an entrepreneur's journey. No, it's not. Dyslexics do that every minute of every day. Even putting the washing on. We'll do 3 other things, and, nothing is straight line. So when you realize that, all you have to do is get better at articulating the problem in your mind and trusting your brain's going to work it out. Dyslexic minds are built to solve problems. So if you can define problems better, you will get better answers. And that's usually the secret I find with a lot of the coaching I do, is most of us are so stuck in the how, we miss the what and the why. We're just so stuck in how do I do something, we miss the obvious around us.
Yes, yeah, very much so. Okay, then. Second question is rapid fire set. If an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
Oh, good question. Very good question. How would I explain it to them? I would probably say, when kids are young and when human children, because they're aliens, I'd make sure I specified, when human children are young, I believe that at the age of anywhere between 1 and 4, I don't know the exact age, 80% of the population start to go down the symbolic thinking route. They find it easy to read, to write. They can assess symbols. But humans are not born that way. As a baby, we don't know our mother because she's got a label on her. It doesn't say mum. That's how we know. It's her smell, it's her feel, it's her touch. And it's the kinesthetic visual kind of senses. 20% of the population, in my belief, stick to that going forward in life, and their brains default to it. And so with that default, it makes it easier for them to be spatial thinkers, creators, entrepreneurs, big dreamers. They can learn to read and write, but it takes a lot more brain power. And so we call those people dyslexics. That's how I would probably explain it.
That's a cool answer. Very, very good answer there. Okay, and the final question is rapid fire set, and you're not allowed to promote your own stuff for this. But seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hack show, what is your favorite dyslexia life hack?
Oh, so many. I was thinking about this because ChatGPT is something I'm using more and more. I'm really enjoying it. I'm seeing a lot of dyslexics enjoy it as well, because it's kind of like a filter for our thought process. You can verbalize into it and it comes out with the answers to a point. And there's a great tool called OmniReader. I'm not sure if you've come across OmniReader.
I have not.
Journeys.
No.
So you can install this in Google Chrome.
Okay.
And it works with pretty much every website to read it out. And it's got when you install it in your browser, it works very well with ChatGPT. So it actually adjusts the ChatGPT bar to actually read everything to you in different accents and speeds. I found that really helpful.
Yeah. Cool. That is a different hack to ones I've heard before, but
I thought I'd say the good one for you, Matthew. Let's say the good one.
No, that's really cool. And it's interesting how much more the ChatGPT stuff is coming out and using it for various different things, whether it's to nudge something along or just check something before you send it, or particularly that thing I quite like. I put something in and then tell me what you've changed. So, that's what I missed.
It's good, eh? You realize how much you missed, right?
Yeah. Right. As we bring this podcast to a close, where can people find you if you want people to get in contact with you? And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And I guess for anyone who's listening, you can just search Truth About Dyslexia in the podcast library. Truthaboutdyslexia.com has a great little quiz we've put together. We've also got a support group called Truth About Dyslexia. If you type that into Facebook, you'll find it quite easily. And really, just for anyone out there, just understand that there's so much more to learn, and just keep listening to this podcast and other podcasts, because this could just be what you've always been looking for to find out more about, because that's what happened to me, and I'm so glad I leaned into it.
Yes, definitely. Well, that leaves me to thank you very much for taking the time and getting up early in the morning in New Zealand to come on this podcast.
Very welcome.
And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. I will speak to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.